this is the tour of file pack SSG-040. This is the second of our file packs for AMT's 2021 Bronco. And if you are someone who has resisted buying this kit yet because there's no engine, I'm going to give you two very good reasons right now why to go out and buy one of these kits. The first one is this kit is fantastically tooled. All of the molds, all of the parts on this kit are very nicely detailed. They're sharp. They are really packed full of real life detail. It's actually a really beautifully engineered kit. And the second reason is that this month, later on this month, we will be releasing an engine for it. It's not going to be a stock engine. It's going to be what I think a lot of people would, in their sort of dream scenario, drop into the engine bay of a real Bronco. It is the Coyote motor. But so you're going to have some engine options there. We do also have our four-cylinder Cummins 4BT, which would make a cool rock crawling motor for this thing. But either way, in my eyes, the lack of an engine in this kit is not a hindrance at all. I'm actually really looking forward to building this model because it's so nicely detailed. I've seen a few of them now at shows completed, and they look fantastic. And we have some parts here to help you take them to the next level. So in SSG-040, we gave you two new wheel options, and these are both available in 7 or 8 sizes, I believe. The first one is kind of an aftermarket wheel styled after a Defiant brand wheel. And these are one-piece wheels. So we gave you a sort of regular offset and then a deep offset option on these. Again, in sizes from 15 scale inches all the way up to 18 scale inches on the rim size there, so that you can use them on a lot of different builds. Next up, we did the wheel from the kind of heritage style Bronco. So this is just a very sort of classic looking wheel. And if you see the heritage trim line on the new Broncos, it's a very sort of retro styled look, and they have a 4-slot wheel that's similar to this on those. And I saw one when Josh from VCG Resins and I were in Arizona. There was a Bronco, heritage trim Bronco in front of us in a drive-through, and they had one of these on the spare tire on the back, and I was like, man, that is a cool wheel. So we went ahead and did that one for you as well. Next up are the tires. Now, we did this basic tire back in SSG-35, our first Bronco file pack. These ones have just been upgraded with additional detail. So we have all of the sidewall detail on these, including the tire size, which is unique to each of the size of tires that we've given you here. And we have these on all the way from like I want to say about a 31-inch size. It's like a 285. Let's look here. This one we're looking at here's a 39-inch, but we have these all the way from 235, 75, R15 on up to this 39-inch wheel. Actually, the 315 might be, I don't know if it's a little bit bigger than this, but it would be kind of in that same size range as well. So a bunch of different sizes on these Destination MT2 tires. Next up, a couple winches, 2 different styles here, both done in a one-piece style. If you want to just kind of print it and go, then this is going to be a good option for you. However, we also like to offer files in a way that make them a little bit easier to detail paint, which for me at least means multiple pieces that I can paint and then assemble. So we've given you this winch in a multi-piece assembly as well, with all of the locating pins and unique shapes on those locating pins, so there's really no question of what goes where. And this one here, you can wrap wrap your wire for your winch around the spool here. We give you a little hole in the backside where you can start that wrap of your wire if you want just a little bit of additional detail there. We did give you the winch hook as a separate piece as well for those of you that are building the multi-piece version and putting your own wire or cord in there for that winch line. So this is kind of a modern style winch. And then also we gave you a classic style Warren winch, just a classic M series. This thing will go great on anything from a modern Bronco or Jeep all the way back to like an old Land Cruiser, an old Jeep CJ, something like that. Really a versatile file here. And again, same thing, giving you the one-piece version here as well as the multi-piece files here as well. This was something that was requested by some people in one of the shop talk calls, and so we made sure to put this in this file pack. This is a Rooftop Tent. This one does fit, the brackets that come with it fit the basket style roof rack from SSG-040, but it could be adapted to sit directly on the roof or on some roof rails, we have some bonus files coming out here shortly of another style of roof rack that's more of a kind of square, more modern style roof rack, and you could certainly adapt this to set on that as well. But this one here, we've given you a ladder for the side, but the tent itself we've done with a few options. So we've given you the open tent sides with the open doors and windows here, and you could certainly use some fabric or like fine mesh to create your windows and doors in there if you like. We've also done a closed version if you just kind of want to paint this and detail it up, complete with some zipper detail here. But then the other thing as well, I'll turn the visibility of that off as well. An air mattress here. We did also give you a sleeping bag file. This is a file that was licensed from a designer on Thingiverse that just looked like a fun little addition to the tent. So we licensed that from the designer, that Cato on Thingiverse. There is license information in the file pack if you want to learn more about the designer or that file. But lastly here, this tent can be displayed open or closed. So it is hinged down here. You can use a little bit of wire in these hinges to play this however you like. So I'll show you that here. So you can display the tent open or closed. A lot of different options there for you.
That's cool. I like that.
We've got some more moving parts stuff coming up here in this file pack as well.
I have the new AMT Bronco. I'm just been waiting for someone to come out with some really neat little accessories to put on it, because I'm not one to do something bone stock, so I want to do something kind of cool.
Definitely
with this.
go when your access opens to the archive store. Definitely go check out SSG-040 in the archive store. We did that basket style roof rack, and there are a ton of jerry cans and other gas cans, like Rotopack style stuff. There's a jack, some traction boards, a lot of fun accessories to throw on this thing as well. Next, we did a few different styles of step bars. This one is kind of just a fairly basic sort of modern tube step. And this one we did without Bronco specific mounting brackets. So to use this one on the Bronco, you probably will need to add some material on the top of the bracket here to attach it to the bottom of the floor pan on that specific kit. But really, we kind of left this one very generic, so you can use it on a lot of different builds, trucks, 4x4s, what have you. Next, some sort of classic Nerf style bars. These brackets are separate pieces and they are adjustable. Again, this is another one that really could be adapted for use on any sort of build you want to use it on. But we did give you a pin on this and a slot in the back of the bar to really allow you to adjust this to any build you might be putting it on. And then lastly, as far as the side steps go, I'm going to show this on camera first. Steve, we were talking just a second ago about moving parts. This is our folding step here.
Oh,
This thing folds. So this, you just use some 24 gauge wire in the pivot points, and I'll kind of show you that here digitally. So this is what it looks like.
Okay. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. And so the way I did this is I cut wire that was longer than what I needed. And I got my pins in place, and I kind of went one step at a time. So first I did the pivot arms to the bracket, put my wire through, and then I put a dab of super glue right where the wire, right at the outlet of this hole on one side. I let that set up, and then just came in with my sprue cutters and cut the excess wire off of both sides, and then just went all the way around. And
make sure it's a thick super glue, not a thin runs all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. I used the Super Gold from BSI. That's a really good point, Dennis, is you want to make sure that it's not a real thin super glue that's going to wick into that pivot.
Yeah, exactly.
I found out the hard way.
A little dab of epoxy right at the outside would also work very well, I think.
This for the Bronco, is this a generic side step?
This one certainly could be adapted to any other build that you want to do. These brackets do specifically fit the Bronco, so there's a gap between the side of the body, the chassis, and then the floor pan sits up a little ways, and these are actually sized to fit that gap really nicely. I dabbed a little bit of super glue on this surface here and this surface here, because this is where the frame rail comes through. Now, if we look at it from the top, and I'm going to change the camera to orthographic to give us just a perfect top-down view here. The brackets are different. So the rear brackets work for either side, but in the front, that frame rail starts curving into the inside of the vehicle a little bit. So the front brackets are mirrored. We have a left and a right that fit the curvature of that frame rail.
Okay.
Yeah, moving parts just add just so much to a model. Sometimes it's you don't have to be a lot of moving parts, but it just adds so much.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's something we've really been playing around with a lot and trying to do more of in the files that we're bringing you, to bring more dynamism and sort of adjustability or customizability to your builds. And these ones, at least with my resin and my settings, there's just enough friction in the fit that it holds the step bar up no problem. We did actually design in just a little bit of a ramp on I'm going to hide this pivot pin here. So we did design in a little bit of a ramp. This is like 0.06 millimeters high, just to give a little bit of extra grip when you fold that step up.
Nice.
And then the last thing for securing those accessories we talked about, not only the ones from SSG-040, but when we do this little bonus drop, we have a couple more that we're going to throw in that pack as well. A handful of different ratchet strap ratchets. So these are designed to use 1/16 inch ribbon that you'd find at a fabric store or a craft store. So this slot here will fit that 1/16 inch ribbon, and the pin on the front here is also the correct width. You can wrap that ribbon around there. So we've given you these in 2 different sizes, and in each size we've given them to you closed and then fully open, or sort of 90 degrees open, and also a 45-degree open version here as well. And that rounds out the tour of SSG-040. Like I mentioned, we will have a few more bonus files coming out. We've got that other roof rack that I mentioned, and a couple more just sort of accessories and fun things to go along with it that'll come out here soon. And that'll go to all members. That's not going to be an exclusive bonus pack for any of the membership tiers. That's just coming out to everybody. And so now we'll switch over to Lychee. And we'll do a supporting walkthrough here. So I'm going to pull in a couple different wheels. All right, so my standard suggestions for supporting wheels are going to be the way we're going to do these. And Clint, you were talking a little while ago about, we were talking about orientation, and I'll show you kind of why angle matters and go a little bit further in depth on that topic here. So in general, we want to minimize the amount of cross-section that the screen is printing at any one time, because the more cross-section we have, the more supports we have to add, but also the more possibility there is for the part to fail, the release force from it releasing from the film becomes too much, it pulls it off of the supports, things like that.
Not to sound ignorant, he's saying cross section. Are you talking about like right there in the middle, actually having it tilted at a 45, or?
Yeah, and I'll show you that right now. So if I just were to throw supports on this as is, then if we use our layer preview slider here in our slicer, what we see is that when we get to the bottom of this part, those very first layers that are printing, we just have kind of this really long cross section. And if we printed this like this, just the wheel just vertical or almost vertical, then if we don't support all of this cross section, we're going to end up with kind of a wavy surface there, where the areas around the supports actually start printing properly, but the areas between supports don't start printing right away until those areas near the supports kind of build out to fill those areas. And so that's going to give us issues. At the very least, it's going to give us just an ugly surface there on those first several layers. But if we go back to, let me remove the supports from this one.
Yeah, actually, I've had wheels come up in an oval shape a little bit. In the slight oval.
Yeah. And that's just because there's not enough support there to really keep the dimensions locked in where we want them. With wheels, I always recommend going basically just off of horizontal on the back face of the wheel. It's nice because it's going to hide your support marks, so you don't have to be as anal retentive about cleaning them up per se. But B, now if we throw supports on this thing, now we have, if we go back down to the bottom, if we put just a tiny little bit of an angle on it, you see how much smaller our starting layer is here. And so we have less to support, and there's less area for things to go wrong and for us to get that wavy kind of surface.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say that on round objects like this, in general, I much prefer the workflow of using Lychee, but I will say that Lychee's auto supports are not as good as Chidu Box's auto supports, especially on round items like this. So we're always going to want to come in after we do the auto support and beef up the supports. And so we're going to start here down at the low side. And for those of you who may not be super familiar with the slicer, this white area that you're seeing as I move this support, as I move my cursor around, that white area is showing you each individual layer. And so when we come down here, we see that really there's a tiny first layer that I don't even think we're going to be able to get on, but then that whole second layer is kind of right here. Now, if you notice, what that means is this support, this lowest point support that Lychee gave us, isn't actually really on the lowest part of the object. So I'm going to actually move that support down to the very, very bottom point, that very first spot that's going to start printing as as it gets to the top of the supports and starts printing your object. We can see here that this edge down here is going to be that very first point. So I'm going to make sure that I have that supported, and then I'm going to come in, and because this is a round object, for the first little ways up the up the side of this thing, I'm really just going to jam supports in here. And again, because we're using light supports, these are going to really pull away cleanly from the model. There's not going to be a whole lot of cleanup that needs to happen. And so really there's no reason not to just kind of load up the supports. And so I'll go about a quarter or a third of the way. If we were to look at this as like a pie piece, this is like probably about a quarter of the total circumference of this thing, that I'm really just jam packing supports in there. And then I'm going to come in and spread them out a little bit more, but I'm still going to add more supports. And again, especially I've found in Lychee, curved surfaces like this that are on any sort of angle, whether it's 5 degrees or 45 degrees, they can get a little wavy if you don't support them well. So I'm coming around all the way around the outside, and then I'm going to put a few on the inside as well.
Anycubic has their own splicing software that when I got the printer, I downloaded, and they have a thing where, you can, I guess, depending on the degree, if you basically, it's how many supports show up automatically when you click on the automatic generator supports. And one of the settings they have is, besides, the shape of the actual tip of the support, but how much it actually goes into the print itself.
Yeah, the penetration of the support.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I never really know like how deep to go into that, or how, if that even really makes that much of a difference if you go deeper in as far as light, medium, or heavy support.
Yeah, so typically where you'll see that is if you're using a shape on the end of your support. So like some slicers give you the option of putting a little sphere or a little pyramid on the tip of your support. then that's really where that penetration is going to come into play, is how deep that tip shape goes into the item. I like just using the standard sort of cone shaped tip shape, because then you don't end up with a lot of extra meat on the end of that support that can stick through the model. You will see here, we see the penetration of the supports here. And truthfully, on light supports with just the cone shaped tips, it's small enough that it's a very easy job to just come through very quickly and sand any of that away. So I don't even really bother changing that anymore.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's how I'm gonna do all of these wheels, whether they're the one piece or the two piece, is really just go a few degrees off of horizontal there, auto supports, and then come in and beef up the supports, especially on the low side of your circular faces here. And the wheel rim would be the same thing as we did over here.
Okay.
Tires, I do the same way that I do wheels. I bring these just off of horizontal and start with auto supports on light. At an ultra density.
That works good, Chris. It
This
works
does?
good. I started doing that now since you suggested it.
Yeah.
That works good.
Well, I got wheels I can reprint using this method here. That you're showing me, I'm already thinking about all the wheels I can reprint now.
Yeah, and really I don't do anything with light supports under a high density of supports. For a tire, because it's a little bit beefier, it's a little bit heavier and more dense, I'm going to do ultra supports on this. And then same kind of thing, we're just going to come underneath and check and make sure that we're well supported. So again, another example of Lychee kind of dropping the ball here on some of the lowest spots. If we see here, really this sort of tread block, or maybe this one here, this tread block is going to be our low point of the print, and looks like it actually did pretty good at getting this support right on that point. But then if we're looking at the main part of the sidewall, we see that our low point here on the main part of the sidewall has no supports on it. And so this is an area where you would end up with a pretty big wave that would be noticeable. In general, we're going to put the support side on the inside of the tire, or the back side, which is facing towards the inside of the vehicle. But even still, we want to, this would create a pretty visible, wavy, wonky surface there. So I'm going to put a support right here in the middle of this low point, and then a few more moving outward from it as well. And then I'm gonna throw a few more up here. Because this is a little bit heavier of an item, a little bit more dense of an item, I am going to be inclined to come in and put at least one medium support in on near my lowest point or on my lowest point. I'm probably going to put two down here on these tread blocks, which are looking like they're the lowest point of the whole print. And that really just kind of helps to keep it anchored in. Now, it's maybe not a bad idea to go put a few more medium helper supports, a couple halfway, and then maybe one up near the top. just to kind of keep this guy locked in. And then on a tire like this that has pretty aggressive tread blocks, you may find that you, on the low side of the tire, you may find that you want to come in and put some light supports on the low points of these tread blocks. And we can see here, if we really zoom in on this tread block here, we can see that there is an island right here, this little white area that's not connected to the rest of the body. And so that's an area that would, if we don't support it, it would kind of round off because there was no support right on that island. So on a tire, you kind of have to decide, is this, is the labor to go around and put a support on every island, on every tread block, worth it, or can I live with a little bit of rounding on those corners? In general, I kind of go the fast and loose version, and I don't support every single tread block. I always know too that, if there is a spot where it's a little bit more apparent than others, I can just make that the bottom of the tire. And then sometimes Lychee likes to put in these little random supports that aren't actually doing anything. And so you can just go through and delete those.
Driving something that aggressive on the concrete anyway, they get rounded off, so it wouldn't be too unrealistic if that was the case.
Yeah, and that's very valid too. With tires, it's always a good idea to come in and look at the inside, the opening where it sits on the wheel as well, and look at our low side here, and just make sure that this is well supported. So I'm going to throw a few more supports in along this inside edge here. And then same thing down here with the opening of the tire on the outside on the sidewall. On the low side, it can get a little wavy if we don't support that as well. And that right there is how I would do the tire. And, one of the questions we get, people say, man, if you're using so many supports, that just seems like a waste of resin, right? But the thing I always say is
printing it again.
Yeah, exactly. Dennis hit it
I
on the
feel
head.
like it's a waste of resin.
Yeah, if anything that helps me get an even better print, not a waste of resin in my mind.
I found too, once you do all the supports on one, you just do a copy of the 4, and they all do them all the same as the first one.
Exactly.
Print them.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, no reason to. That's a
Do
very
it on
good
every
point.
single
No
one.
reason to support 4 of the same object. And I'll show you that here on the next one. So we'll pull in this winch.
I found that by mistake one night, and I go, "Whoa, what the heck? Oh, that's nice."
Yeah,
Yeah, done
I've been wasting so much time.
Yeah, I know.
Any cubic has it. I don't know. I used to use the jigger box with the Elgu, and one of the things I don't remember because I really never messed with the supports that much, but with any cubic, I was adding supports one by one, and I was printing off an exhaust system, and it took forever to sit there and line it up. But then I realized I think it's like shift, and you can just highlight one area, and it'll just like do it automatically. And I was like, wow, that's so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Lychee has a similar feature called support painting that I'll show you. For the one-piece Warn Evo winch, I'm going to probably orient this so that it's tilted towards the back face. Again, I'm always thinking about hiding supports. on places that they'll be less visible on the built model. And so I'm going to show this on just kind of two angles here. And then we'll start with light auto supports. Now this is one where we're probably going to want to put one or two supports on every little island of this coil of the winch line here. Otherwise, we will end up with kind of some wavy surfaces there. So I would throw at least one support on the low point of every little revolution of this coil. But talking about that support painting, in Lychee, if you just click and hold your mouse button down and drag, it'll paint supports that are spaced. You know, it has some sort of minimum spacing rule that it uses, but it'll allow you to come in and just add supports very quickly. Maybe not the most pinpoint precision way to do it, but if you just need to add a bunch of supports to a model, it's a pretty efficient way of doing it. And I think this looks pretty good. There's really no way to avoid having to put at least one support on this switch for the winch, but you see Lychee just put one of its little mini supports in here automatically, and I think that's going to do the trick. And those mini supports are nice. They print so thin that even on something this fragile, you can still just come in before you cure it. You can come in with an X-Acto knife and just sort of knock this mini support out of the way. Now, as far as the individual pieces of the multi-piece winch, we were talking about cross-section earlier, and this is a really good part to give an example on as well. Anytime you come up against an object like this that is kind of cylindrical in nature, you know, a lot of people would be inclined to just sort of angle it like this and print it. What you're going to end up with is kind of some uneven surface along the low side here, unless you really come in and jam it with supports. But what happens, and let's do that. I'll show you if we put auto supports on this. So we would have to really pack in a lot more supports here to get a good clean surface on the bottom side here. But the other thing then is if we look, if we run through the layer preview again, as this prints up, we now have a much larger surface area here than we need, or a much larger cross section than we need. If we instead, if we remove the supports from this guy, if we instead orient him exactly vertically, then we need fewer supports. I'm still going to come in and add more supports along the bottom face here, here, and then also a few more on the locating pin. But now if we look at the cross section as this prints, because it's facing straight up and down, we have a much smaller cross section. We're going to get a much cleaner surface on these cylindrical faces, and we're going to have less chance of this pulling off of the supports. Now, it might be tempting to do the same thing on the sort of motors or end pieces here of this winch, put it up vertically like this. Then you have the smallest cross section possible. However, this is one where you're going to want to be thinking a few steps ahead. And if we orient this like this, then we're probably going to have some support marks in this mating surface that are going to make mating this to the other part difficult, and a lot more difficult to sand or try and remove support marks inside, a feature like this. So this is one where what I like to call counterintuitive supports is, normally we want to hide those supports, but in this instance, I'm going to print this guy just off of vertical with the outside face facing down, because if I'm thinking a few steps ahead, I realize it's a lot easier to sand this surface and get support marks off of this surface than it would be out of this hidden surface, but the surface that's going to be used for mating up to another piece. So on this one, same thing again, ultra density on my light supports. And then I'm going to come in and you see, Lychee really kind of crapped the bed here on the auto supports on this one. It didn't even get anything near the low point of this piece. So we're going to come in and add those. And then the opposite side would be done the same way. Now, I still haven't had the time to get my hands on Cheetahbox 2.0. I intend to do that here soon, and I'm going to do a review video of it to kind of show everybody the new features and the differences, and see how I like it. It may sound like I'm talking a lot of crap about Lychee's auto supports, and in a way I kind of am. I think they're a little lackluster, but I like the workflow overall in Lychee so much better than the older versions of Cheetahbox, at least, that it's been something I've kind of lived with in choosing which to make my usual go-to slicer. But I will be really interested to see how Cheetahbox 2.0 is, for sure.
It's different. You
Is
guys
it?
One of the
don't
things
relearn it.
One of the things I learned about, because I had a problem with the Chichi box, and I actually had to use Lychee for a while, is one thing I realized, because again, the Chichi box was what I started with, and I found it to be a little bit more user friendly for someone who's just starting than the Lychee. But when I started using the Lychee, I realized that it was more involved, which is not a bad thing if you know or have an idea of what's going on with all the extra tidbits of it. But to me, the Chichi box was just more user friendly for someone who's just getting started.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's pretty much the exact arc of the beginning of my printing journey as well, as I downloaded both and looked at all the stuff in Lychee and was a little overwhelmed, and so went to Cheetahbox, and I used Cheetahbox exclusively for a couple years, and then reapproached Lychee and kind of started working my way through Lychee.
Give me one second. I think I'm being summoned here.
All right, so then, we'll look at the Warn M series now real quick. And I'll drop that hook in there too. Well, the one piece again, I'm going to do kind of the same thing. Just angle this on 2 angles towards the back of the winch where those support marks will be a little bit more hidden. And then just use an ultra density or a high density if you're in Cheetah Box. And Cheetah Box ultra density, I would say, is probably anything above like 80 to 84%. Their high density in lychee seems to be in the high 60s to 70s range in what you would see in Cheetah Box. And again, I'm going to come and double check the very lowest point, and you see lychee almost got it there. I'm just going to move that bottom support to that very lowest point. And actually, this piece is a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and make that a medium support and then move it inboard just a hair so that it's still touching that very low point, but it's not sticking way out on the side there. And then I'll switch back to light supports. Again, this is another one where we would want to, and this might be a little tricky the way we have this oriented actually as I look at it. It might be, I think it's going to let us get supports in here on these bottom coils. And I think we're probably not right on the bottom. Actually, we're pretty close to the low point there. Yeah, so that's going to work. Again, I would just support each one of these revolutions of this cable here. And then we probably have some islands up here on these cooling fins on the motor. We sure do. And so we'll support those as well. And that's really only an issue until we get part of the way up the side of this motor here. Because now you can see those are connected, so we no longer have islands there. Definitely, I would angle this one if you're printing the one-piece version. I would angle it away from the gearbox, meaning angle the gearbox up away from the build plate so that we don't have to really support all of this more fragile stuff here. You will see there was an island down here on the switch that lychee caught and added a mini support to, and that'll be, again, real easy to just blow out of there with the tip of an X-Acto knife or something. Otherwise, this one's looking pretty good. We may want to go in and, depending on the level of attention to detail you're putting here, you can go in and support the islands on the little bolt heads there. These pieces are probably going to be pretty self-explanatory on how to orient and print. In general, we're going to something like the mounting plate here, just angling in two axes is going to give us the cleanest surface here. Same thing with this front plate. And really same thing all around. On this one, on the motor here, you kind of have a choice. This, if we angle it with that mounting face towards the build plate, we are going to give ourselves some support cleanup that's going to be a little more crucial to getting that to fit the matching slot on the gearbox. This might be another one where I would be inclined to instead angle it to an outside face and have something that's a little bit easier to sand. And then for the gearbox, I'm going to angle towards the bottom of it and then towards the back of it, I think. Again, it's gonna make it so that I really don't have to do as much supporting of this fragile stuff that's on the outside face. There will be a little bit of cleanup here to do of supports on a mounting face, but it shouldn't be too bad looking at this. And as long as we keep supports out of this female mounting point, it shouldn't really be anything that's too difficult to clean up. The drum, again, just like the one on the other winch, I'm going to do that either, perfectly vertically or right off of vertical. And we could use, we could use the text boxes here to input a specific angle, to input like 90 degrees. I would do this one. I would support this one probably the other way. This is a very visible face and has a little bit more fragile details on it. So this one, again, while a mounting face, I think isn't going to cause too many problems with cleanup. I would just, again, try and keep any supports away from this female mounting slot here. For the winch hook,
I'm sorry. The way I was doing the wheels before, I was doing a 45 degree. And in fact, as you can kind of see, I don't know if I'm get over where I'm at. Where I was doing the 45 degree print. And one of the things that I've noticed is inside I guess where you would actually stick the tab, you were saying a female version of the adapter, it would get clogged up in there and it would be a nightmare to clean out or smooth out.
Yep. Yeah. So again, definitely pays to pay attention to what what the building steps are going to be, and kind of set your supports and your orientation accordingly. Now for this tow hook. This one, I think, I'm going to print this one something like that. There's not really a lot of straight, flat edges that run the width of this thing. So it's okay if it's more or less vertical in this axis. And then I'm just going to angle it probably about like that. And then we can probably move down to high or even normal density on supports here. I'll do high on something like this. It's, well, yeah. So I don't think it wouldn't make a difference. So it's only giving us one support here. This is not going to be enough. I think you would probably lose this thing to the film, or if it did manage to print and stay on the support, this is one of those pieces that if you only had it on one support, you're going to lose it in your wash machine or in your wash bucket or whatever you're doing. So, I would definitely throw a few more supports on it. Something like that. Now we do have this pin here. This might actually be a decent reason to flip the orientation now that I'm looking at this, because this cotter pin here is going to give us islands, and if we don't support those in some way, then it's going to those probably won't print at all until it gets up to the clevis here. We could try doing a mini support and see if that gets us. And that's basically just a blob on there. Let's see what this thing looks like if we angle it the other way. Here, now give us a few more supports. So now what we can do, I'm going to click over to mini support, maybe, if it'll let me. Let's put some more supports on here first. So you notice we have an island here that we'll need to support. And then, okay, there we go. Now we'll put on mini supports, and I'll support the bottom of this cotter pin there. And probably support these little islands on the inside of this hinge as well. And that should be good to go. Just like that. I don't think we have any other islands that I'm seeing. All right, the tent here and the sleeping bag, all that good stuff. I'm gonna move a bunch of this stuff out of the way first. So the bracket is, pardon me, the bracket is pretty self-explanatory. I'm probably going to flip this over so that I'm printing the top side of it, and just angle it on 2 axes there. That one's pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory. Same thing with the clamp for that bracket. Probably going to do that on an angle like that. The base and the lid, I think these ones, you're going to get the best overall quality, the best dimensional accuracy, and the least warping if we sort of print those basically almost on their side, angled just a little bit off of vertical in this axis, and then some measure of a decent angle here. You can throw some supports on this one. Actually, I would do this at a high density, not a medium, an ultra density, not a high density. So I'm going to remove those, move that up to ultra. And that looks pretty good. Now, because this is a much larger part, I am going to want to add in some medium supports. So I'm going to add in a couple medium supports down here right by the very bottom. And then, because this is such a large piece, I'm going to come in and add some more medium helper supports kind of up the length of the bottom edge of this this piece, and then probably on the back side here too. With larger pieces like this that stick further off of the build plate, I do like to put in some medium supports higher up the piece that just kind of help lock it in place. It's going to help you avoid layer lines and layer shifts and things like that. So that's how I would do both the base and the lid. And I would angle the hinges here for the base and the lid. I would angle these up and away from the build plate. So we'll get rid of both of those. The air mattress here. This one's fairly self-explanatory as well. I would do this similarly. I would put it just off of vertical on that axis. And then angle it, something like that. That's going to help us avoid that suction cup or that void area with this being hollowed out on the bottom side. And then same rules apply here as for the base and the lid. Ultra density or a very high density of light supports, and then some medium supports down at the very bottom of the piece, and some medium helper supports further up the model as well. For the ladder, I would go just kind of off of vertical on this guy. I think angling it in one axis is going to be just fine. And then this one's going to be one that we're just going to want to kind of watch because we have these cylindrical faces, and because we have them at right angles to each other, it means we can never have all of our cylindrical objects facing vertically off of the build plate. So these ladder rungs that run more shallowly at an angle to the build plate, we're just going to want to kind of beef up the bottom of those faces with additional supports on all three rungs, just to give ourselves a really well supported surface that's kind of free of waviness and any sort of ugliness there from being under supported. And I would do that all the way up each of those rungs. The sleeping bag. This one's a little tricky because it is hollow. And so we want to avoid having a suction cup area again. And so for that, I think the best way to do that is going to be to kind of stand it up a little bit on its side and then angle it. Let's just make sure that makes sense. And this is where that layer preview slider really comes in handy to kind of help visualize what's happening here. So you see we do have a void here in the middle, but we have an opening down here where that pressure can equalize and resin can drain out of down towards the build plate. So that's going to be just fine like that. Yeah. Yep, that is how I would do that sleeping bag. And then, you know, the side benefit is it means we get to support the bottom side of this, and where you won't really see it once it's installed in the model. This one, because it is kind of dense, I'm definitely going to do an ultra density of light supports and then come in and probably put a good number of medium supports in here. This piece is probably heavier and denser than most model car parts you'll find yourself printing. So definitely adding some more heavy support, or not heavy supports, but a heavier amount of medium supports in here is going to help this print successfully and not pull off of the supports. Now, I think, now we'll look at the tent sides here. I'm just going to show one. We don't need to look at both because they're going to be basically the same. This is, in all of my time doing these file pack tours, I could probably count on on one hand the number of times I've said to print something directly on the build plate, and this is going to be one of them. I think what I'm going to do, what I would recommend for this piece and the other one, the one with the closed sides and window, I'm going to put this directly on the build plate, but I want to flip it over. I want to use the top surface, not the bottom surface, because the bottom surface has these thinner areas that are going to be fragile if we're trying to peel those right off of the build plate. So we can use the on plate tool. Cheetah Box has a similar tool. I forget the term they use for it, but we can click on plate on the rotation, on the rotate menu, and then just choose our face, and it puts that face directly flat on the build plate. Now we are going to want some supports on these thin areas. So what we have to do when we come over to to the support menu is we're not going to generate automatic supports. When we do that, it lifts the object off of the build plate. So we're just going to come in and manually probably paint these supports in. And light supports should definitely be sufficient for this. And so I'm just, again, clicking and dragging to paint those supports. Now, the only reason I could see an argument for not printing this flat on the build plate is going to be this edge here at the bottom of that front window of the tent. Because you see, if we run through the layer previews, that is going to give us one long edge that we're going to have to support. So we're just going to probably, if we're doing this flat on the build plate, we're just going to support the heck out of this edge. And we can even just try using the support painter now. It's going to be better if we move the slider up a little bit and can see a little bit more of that surface. But that's going to be the only tricky spot, printing this flat on the build plate. But we did kind of design this as well. If you look here, you can see that there's the outside edge of these openings has kind of a roundover or a fillet on it. The idea was that you could cut your own tent flaps out of some sort of fabric or mesh, if you like, and glue it along here, and have that, kind of draped inside the tent. And so that especially if you're doing that, then this edge would be hidden anyways, and so probably not as crucial. But you can see I'm really kind of packing the supports in here, and I would do that all the way across there. And then there may still be a little bit of sanding that you have to do to smooth that out. But I think printing this flat on the build plate is going to be probably the best way to go. Now, if we click over to our resin settings here, what we find is on our burn-in layers, and we do have calibration files in Scale Speed Garage. I believe those are in the starting line section. They might be in one of the other video sections, but we do have a video and associated files for calibrating your burn-in exposure or your exposure compensation. What happens, because when we run a higher exposure time on our base layers, our burn-in layers, they overexpose compared to the regular exposure, and so anything that's printed right on the build plate in those burn-in layers has a tendency to grow outward. And so what you can do, you can use the calibration files that we've given you in that section. You can download those, print them flat on the build plate, and then take your pair of calipers or a ruler or what have you, and measure how much additional material prints when you print something right on the build plate. And then you can come in and actually compensate for that on your burn-in layers. So you might put, like negative 0.5 millimeters for compensation if you have 0.5 millimeters of extra material from those burn-in layers. You can actually remove that here in your compensation, your burn-in compensation part of your settings. And so that finishes up the tent. The step bars are really going to be very self-explanatory. I'm probably not going to belabor the point too much with them. As with most everything else we do, we're just going to want to angle those on 2 axes, something like that. And all of the sort of other supporting pieces are going to be the same way. So I don't think there's really anything that needs to be shown in depth on the step bars. And the ratchet straps, we can look at a couple of these real quick. And I always laugh because it always seems like most of our file packs, we end up with some items that are pretty big and then some items that are pretty teeny tiny. And these are actually not as small as some of the other things we've released lately, like some of those the tie rod ends or the Heim joints for the mini truck suspension. But these, again, same way, angle in 2 axes. I think actually angling this so that the end of the handle is down is going to give you the easiest time sanding all that stuff. And it's not really going to give us any horrendous islands that we have to try and support or anything. So I'm just going to see what Auto Supports does on this. And that looks pretty good. And one of the things too is at least when you get files from us, we're paying attention to these things in the design process too. So we're trying to design as many islands out of things as possible just to make your slicing and supporting easier. We're trying to design out any really fragile areas, again, just to kind of make your printing and processing easier. So most of these are pretty good to go right out of the gate. And I think the larger style ratchet strap, I would be inclined to do kind of the same way. Handle down, that's going to give us the easiest cleanup here. And nothing really out of the ordinary there on those.
Nice thing about these ratchet straps is it's going to carry over good to the lawnmower package that you did.
Yeah.
Because now you can use it to strap your machine down into the trailer and kind of give it more, or the ladder rack, for example, too. You got your ladder up, use it to strap it down, right?
Totally.
Well, I think that was totally a good idea.
And that's, that's again, like another, to get a little more philosophical about how we approach planning file packs is, yes, this is a file pack that is geared toward the new Bronco, but it's not by any means a file pack that you can only use for the new Bronco. And in general, that's how we try to approach every file pack.
Well,
Is
it's like I
giving-
mentioned when I messaged you earlier about using that roof.